Brilliant. So if you go into your, in fact, if you go into, if I send you the link here, that's great. Okay, Mentimeter links. Let's go with, if you go into the Google Classroom, sorry, I've got my son, my husband and my son arguing right outside the door. Okay. Here we go. Can everyone go to this Mentimeter first, if I pop it in the chat here. Morning, everybody. Morning, morning. So if you can go to, I love my Mentimeters. Can you go to that? And that one, it's just come up in the chat. Maybe do a hands up on the chat once you found it. Ah, lovely. Well done, Nimka. Fantastic. Lovely. The tab. I think it's this one here. I'm going to see. No, that's not what I wanted to share. I wanted to share. Good, so getting some good ideas here. I'm just going to have it so we can all see each other's. Haha. So we have got, so basically with the applied ethics topics, which are euthanasia and business ethics, which I think you did do quite a bit of the summer homework on. But obviously we haven't spent class time on it yet, but we will spend class time on it soon. And then before Christmas, we'll make sure we've done both topics of business ethics and euthanasia. Each one, it's only applying two ethical theories to each one. So for business ethics, it's utilitarianism and canteen ethics. And we did do a bit of canteen ethics in class. So it won't be brand new. And then for euthanasia, it's natural moral law and situation ethics. I'd just rather do that in class in person than over like online with euthanasia. So I thought it'd be a good chance to sort of remember what we know about utilitarianism. I thought that gift was a really good idea last night. It's actually quite annoying bouncing in the corner. So the greatest amount of good to the greatest number of people, I guess. Pleasure, Bentham. Benefit the majority, hedonism, good. So Bentham, Mill rather than Miller is the name, yeah. Eudaimonia, that one actually matches more with natural moral law. It's the idea of everyone, yeah, that sort of fits more with synderesis and natural moral law and Aquinas. I wouldn't put it necessarily with utilitarianism. Pleasure, good, great, fantastic. Yeah, this idea that aiming for the, it's kind of, one of the criticisms is that it's sort of, does the will of the majority or the pleasure of the majority outweigh that of the minorities? So one of the criticisms you could put, especially with business ethics, is like, do you end up doing what's best for most people, forgetting there might be certain minorities? So it could be some of the workers compared to the consumers, for example, like whose rights are weighed out over the others. So it's a really good thing to think of that with utilitarianism and business ethics. Or we're going to think about whistleblowing when someone says if they think something's unethical or bad in the company. What if that only benefits a few people, and then if the whole company goes down and everyone loses their jobs, and then, but then maybe it's still the right thing to do. Nobody here has put higher or lower pleasures, so you might have that difference between, Mill's got his ideas of which ones are higher or lower pleasures. That will come in with us for business ethics to do with if you're pursuing money, he would say that's a lower pleasure, rather than pursuing other greater goods, I guess. And finally, the hedonic calculus is something that's used, isn't it, by Bentham in particular, to try and work out how do we work out what the greatest good is. So you learnt that with Miss Robson, I'm sure, what the hedonic calculus is, and you could use the same principles applying to business ethics, basically. Great. Okay, just type any questions in the chat, or you can always unmute and ask me as well. That's fine. You don't have to be like silent and camera. You can talk to me as well if you want to, if it doesn't make any sense. But yeah, a good grounding in utilitarianism. And then basically we apply that to business ethics. And then again, with sexual ethics, which is going to come up in January, we do all four again. So we'll have lots of time to keep going over these ethical issues and applying them in different ways. Fantastic. So let me see if I can go. So the second one, what do you remember about Kantian ethics? And you've got a bit of a clue there with one word there to do your something. Do you remember much about Kantian ethics? I know we did it in class quite rushed before the summer, didn't we? I'm thinking, you stuck? Shall I give you some clues? Or is it letting you do it? What about duty, reason? Kantian ethics, the idea is that it is a deontological theory. It's not teleological. I meant to say that for utilitarianism. It is a theory that looks at the action itself rather than looking at the effects of the action. It is a theory that's saying, well, what is the right thing to do in that moment, regardless of what we think is going to happen as the effect. It's the act itself is what we have to look at. Good, deontological goodwill, not a means to an end. Fantastic. So treating every person as if they're an end in themselves, not using people, basically. Kantian ethics, I think, has got quite a lot of common sense. It's like you don't use people. You recognize their worth and their dignity as a person. And that's really interesting for business ethics, because aren't we using the shop, the person who works in the shop as an employee? Aren't we using the people who make the products? If we don't treat them with dignity, if we have them in sweatshop labor, if we don't have fair trade, aren't we using them to our own end, which is to make a profit? So you can see how Kantian ethics can be applied quite a lot to business ethics as well. The idea of the goodwill, yes, it's absolute fantastic. It's not relativist. Remember the example we had of the axe murderer coming to the house, like you never lie, ever. You never lie, even if someone comes and says, I need to come and murder your boyfriend or whatever. I'm not going to lie and say they're not in the house. We looked at that video, and then basically they had an imaginary, well, what if you did lie and the person ran out of the house, out the window, and then the axe murderer also goes out because they think they're not there, and then they bump into them, and then you've kind of orchestrated that. Whereas if you were honest, then you haven't had any part in it. It's all on the axe murderer's sort of conscience for what they've done. So basically, don't lie ever. And that can also match with lots of things in business ethics as well, about being honest and being truthful. Also, if you remember the categorical imperative, so to do that which you would wish basically everyone to do all the time, that maxim, that rule that you would wish, it has to be something you would wish everyone to do all the time. No special instance just for you, no special pleading. It's a little bit like, treat other people as you want to be treated. Is this something you'd want everyone to do all the time? Well, if not, why are you doing it now? And again, it kind of reminds me of like discussions I have with my children and things like that. Fantastic, great. So I think that's the last one for that Mentimeter. I'm going to just get rid of it there for us. Good. Has anyone got any questions right now about either just understanding some of the differences between Kantian ethics and utilitarianism? So they're both what's called secular approaches, even though Kant does bring God into it later. But the ethical theories are secular, meaning they're not religious. Whereas natural moral law and situation ethics, we study as religious theories. So you need to know that Kant and utilitarianism are secular. When we get to sexual ethics, you might need to have that divide and think which one's more useful for sexual ethics. And then the way they're split really is you've got utilitarianism, which is teleological, looking at the impact, looking at the effects, and Kant, which is deontological, looking at the action, the rightness or wrongness of that action itself. Can you type into the chat for me? Which kind of theory do you think is better, teleological or deontological? Do you think it's better to look at the effects or look at the action as the most important bit? Why? You can type it in or unmute and tell me, I don't mind, or you can type it in. Good, Jamila, why? Hi, Reem. You can unmute and speak to me. You don't have to, I don't mind. You can just type in the chat. Hi, you can type in the chat whether you think we're talking about whether teleological or deontological theories are better, really, generally. What do you think? So can you say actions are more important, so deontological, kind of maybe thinking about they both had their merits and weaknesses. Oh, always so diplomatic, Atika. Better to look at the intention. So Jamila, so do you mean the intended outcomes? Jamila, because you said teleological up there. Yeah, but if you had to choose, Atika, what would you choose? Or something else? Maybe they've got two witnesses. B, Nimka, what's B? Oops. I mean, and if you think about business ethics, we're looking at a business ethics does tend to, I think, what do you think becomes the norm in business ethics? If I was running a business and I was trying to decide what to do, what do you think I'm more likely to look at in my business? Or if I'm running a company, which kind of thing, making money, yeah, good. But say I'm like, I don't know, we want to make money, but we want to look good. We want to be ethical. We want to look like we're doing the right thing so that people, yeah, I think in businesses, really, they tend to lean more towards looking at the consequences because they're all about that cost benefit analysis, aren't they? Well, what's this going to cost and how's that going to impact that? And they're very much looking at the actual effects, I think. So you'll see that throughout utilitarianism is kind of used as an approach in a way, that teleological idea, but there's some big weaknesses with that, like Atika said. So there's some big weaknesses of doing it like that, and maybe it's better to have principles that you go by and then hope that that will cause you to have a good business. Lots of this as well is about what does it mean to be good, to have a good business. I think that got us another Mentimeter in a second. Like, what do we mean by good business? Do we mean a business that's making money, like Nuran said? Like, not that you necessarily agree with that, but is that what we mean? You can stop and looking at the intentions. I think it's better so that before you do it, you can stop an unwanted outcome. Yes, but can we tell the future, Nimka? Do we know what's going to be the outcome? I might do something thinking that a certain thing's going to happen, but then it doesn't happen. I don't know. And then I'll look back on it and think, oh, I should have done this or that. Maybe it's better just to start with the action that you know is right or wrong, whatever the outcome. So we don't know the outcomes. But I agree with the Tika that they've both got strengths and weaknesses. I think utilitarianism can be a bit easier to get your head around. So people quite like it as a theory, but I think it's just got so many weaknesses that I don't know. I mean, I think Kantian ethics can seem a bit like big and wordy, but actually it's a lot of principles that people kind of go by in life. And I think they could both apply really well to business ethics, actually. And I think Kantian ethics, I just like the dignity and respect that's given to every person involved. It's not just like the business owner, it's all the different people involved. Fantastic, great. So I'm going to now send you a link for this. I'll show you what I'm reading through with you. I've got this, which I'll print up and give to you at school as well next week. I don't think you've seen this booklet. Just tell me if you've had it already. Looks like this. And it's basically just got you've probably seen things from this person before because they've loads of ethics things which are great. It's like got loads of it's just got notes all about business ethics through the whole thing. So I thought we'd read through some of it today and do some thinking and talking. And then there's and I'm going to set that for everyone to do as well who's not here. And then there is a Google form that I've done as a quiz, literally based on this last night, that you can go through and do in the next couple of weeks. So I'm going to just send you I'll put it into the Google Classroom, but I'll send you the link now so you can pull it up. Hold on, big notes. There you go. That's it. And then I'll share it as well on my screen so that you can see it here. So do you want to open that? Let me know when you have, and then you can like type on it or write on it, or I don't know if you're writing notes or anything. Just let me know if I'm going too fast at any point. Do you want to do a show of hands when you found it, if you've got it? Great. Okay, let's just pop you out here. Oh, brilliant. Well done. Oh, lovely. Okay, let me see if I've got on there. Just gonna get mine up here. It's not the one I wanted to present. This is the one I want to show. Okay. So it should be, this is showing here. Oh yeah, cool, great, good. So it looks like this. We won't get through all of it right now, but we will talk through quite a bit of it. There's quite a few case studies that you can use in, that's great. You can put your hands down if you're happy. Throughout the whole thing, there's quite a lot of case studies. So I'm not going to go into great detail for them now, but I thought that could be a good homework task for everyone to do, and not just the people on the chat now, where you look at the case studies in more depth and sort of think about how you might use them in an essay. Remember that our ethics essays can be a lot about using examples to exemplify and show the different sides. I thought really I'd focus more today on like the theories and how they apply. Oh, crikey, it would be helpful if I could actually see. Oh, there we go. So that's just a reminder of the spec at the beginning. And there's kind of these general areas of things. Let me just check that's what's showing. Yes, lovely. Of things that we need to cover to do business ethics. So we'll go through those 4 things today and think about some questions to discuss around how we can apply these 2 ethical theories to business ethics. So essentially, business ethics is basically looking at how businesses behave in the world of commerce. So how do they behave, not just in terms of their employees, but also all the different, they're called stakeholders, all the different people who've got a part to play or a kind of an interest or are impacted by or affected by the business. Actually, in the chat, why don't some of you write down what you think, who might be stakeholders for business? Who might it matter how business behaves? So if you've got the, you type down some ideas. Who do you think it might be? Or you can unmute and say it to me. You don't have to unmute. Who do you think a stakeholder might be? So who do you think, so you've got employees, good. So the people who work for the business. Who else kind of basically works for the business, but not directly for that company? Who else might there be who's like involved in, connected to employment with the business? People who have shares in the business, so shareholders, fantastic. So the shareholders would be people who are sort of financially gaining from, but also responsible for the business. Good. We've got the employees, shareholders, the business owners, you've got the management. Good. Customers, yeah, absolutely, Reem. The customers, absolutely. I've got a duty, if I'm a business owner, to provide you with something, or we'll think about this in a minute, with something safe, something functional. I'm not cheating you. Think about Kant and not lying, for example. I'm honest about my product I'm giving you, and I'm not harming your life by giving you something that endangers you. Fantastic. Customers, good. Who else? Let's take a business. I don't know, I sell shoes. And in my shoe shop, I've got the employees who are selling the shoes. I've got the customers coming in to get the shoes. But where do I get the shoes from? What would you call that? Where am I getting these shoes from? I'm not making them in the shop. I'm buying them from who? Who might I be buying them from? individuals whose company has an impact. Fantastic. So Fatima, hi Tasnima. If you can hear me, great. So we're just discussing, in fact, I think the chat doesn't, you don't get the chat, the old chat. I'll let someone know. Lovely. We're reading through this booklet that's in Google Classroom. So I'll put it in the chat again here in case you can't find it. So Fatima, yes, we've got the customers. Fatima, individuals whose the company has an impact. So that could be the people who buy things from them, but also people who live in the local area. So locals. So if I have a business, so I'm set up in one little village, I have a duty, in a way, you could say, to the people who live in that village, who lives next door to the factory or who lives next door to the shop, to the people who are around in my area, so the local area. Good. Customers, good. So the thing I was looking for was suppliers. So it's not just the people who work in my company, it's like the people who supply my company and then supply them and supply them. You've heard of like the supply chain. So perhaps I have a duty to keep my business up and running and going because I'm employing people in my shoe shop, but then I'm also employing the people in the factories who make the shoes. And then I'm also kind of employing the people who make the material to make the laces to make the shoes, you know. Then I'm employing people who grow the cotton to make the laces to go on the shoes, to go in the factory, to come into my shop. So there's this whole chain of people that businesses, you could argue, have a duty, or they need to be ethical to protect. And then is it always people? What else could there be? If I'm an oil company drilling for oil in the Antarctic, like who else might I be thinking of, or in the Arctic? Or what else? What else? If I'm a business, or if I'm McDonald's and I need to get a lot of beef, the ecosystem, fantastic. Yeah, the environment. So the environment's another stakeholder, you could argue, has some, because a utilitarian would argue, well, that's going to have some impact on future happiness of people. No, don't worry, Sahana, it's fine. Lovely to see you. Well, see your name. Well, know that you're here. We're talking about business ethics, Sahana, and thinking about who is it that the businesses have to be ethical for. And two, we've got the employees, the owners of the business, but then you've also got the customers. So it could be like the public in general, you could say, or we could say, or the suppliers who supply the business, and then you've got the environment. And a particular thinker who would stress that and the worth of the animals who might be impacted would be Peter Singer, who's a utilitarian. So he crops up in this booklet as well. So he would say, we have to think about the impact on the animals as well. Any sentient being that can feel pleasure and pain and be aware of it, we have a duty to try and make sure they have more pleasure than pain. So we did remind ourselves of Kantian ethics and utilitarianism. So hopefully you'll pick up on that as we go through those who've just joined. Fantastic. Okay, great. So I should just put it to here so I can see what I'm doing here. So that's basically what I'm saying here. So the first thing is this idea of corporate social responsibility, and it can be shortened to CSR. So it's the idea that a company or a business has a responsibility to the society and those around them, the ones that we've just said, all the different stakeholders. So shareholders own the property, own shares in the property, and have this kind of financial connection and interest. And they are one group of people who companies are obviously responsible to, or, they have to account for their actions to. But the idea of corporate social responsibility is it goes much broader than that. And this is everyone who's got some kind of connection, who's going to have some, who said it? Yeah, Fatima, perfect. The individual whose company has an impact on them. So it's got some way of impacting on those people. So then they have to act ethically. So the idea is that it's not just so that we've got the different people here who you've got to have this responsibility for. So you've got kind of, the shareholders, etc. Now here, Milton Friedman is the name of the person who's going to come up a lot. He's an American sort of journalist, writer, thinker. And he writes that actually businesses should only be responsible to their shareholders. It's the only people. The only thing they have to really do is make a profit for their shareholders. That's why they exist as a business. That's all they need to do. So he's a really good view to have, to argue in your essays, against both Kantian ethics and utilitarianism, because both of those ethical theories would sort of disagree with him. So he's a good one that you can use for that other side. So if you have got this open and you can edit it, you could, like, I'm trying to find out how I can highlight it here. You could, yeah, you could possibly highlight him, or when you get to different thinkers, or when I give you your copy at school, I'm going to give you a physical copy of this. You can highlight these people. So he's quite a good person who comes up quite a lot as that like flip side to use to argue for AO2. Good. And he says the only responsibility is to the shareholders. That's who we're responsible to as a business. So some people argue it's about caring for the environment as well, for future generations, not being too noisy, creating too much litter. Many times you might find there's a kind of conflict between the stakeholders and the shareholders, because the shareholders are going to say, okay, we want to have a profit, whereas the stakeholders, I might not care about that business doing well if it's making loads of pollution into my garden every night. I might not care that they're making money or not. So that can be a bit of a problem if there's a bit of a dispute between those two groups. However, not always. Why do you think it might be why might it benefit both shareholders and stakeholders to be an ethical company? What do you think? You could type it on or tell me, I don't mind. How could it benefit both of them? So if we think of how does it, if I've got shares in, okay, what's the company we all know? I don't know. McDonald's. I've got shares in McDonald's, so it helps exactly. I've got shares in McDonald's, so I want them to do well. So if I see them being socially responsible, then it helps the reputation, which means, how does that help me as a shareholder? It means more people might go there and shop there and spend their money there, or buy Happy Meals and all that sort of stuff. So we'll get to that in a minute when we get to a part called Good Ethics is Good Business. This idea that, especially nowadays with social media, with the internet and everything, this companies can't really get away with as many things as they used to be able to. And so they have to watch out and be ethical, because it doesn't help the reputation. Yes, good. Well done, Atika. So sometimes businesses try and help their ethical reputation by contributing to the community in a public way. This is a big thing that companies are doing at the moment, something you can research to get ideas. It sort of talks about it in the booklet as well. Tesco's, every Tesco's has got a big sign, what we do in our local community. They used to have the thing where you put the little blue coin in, which charity do you want to support, so that I think, oh, Tesco's, what a wonderful shop, they're helping their local community. Barclays, I know, did a thing where it's like litter picking, and then all of their Barclays t-shirts, litter picking, so that, oh, that Barclays, what a wonderful bank, they do litter picking in the local area, aren't they wonderful? And then it's going to help me have a good impression of their company. It's all about PR, isn't it? So thinking about the ethical theories then, so for Kant, so if we remember, Kant is about your duty and doing your goodwill. So therefore, if a company is doing it to look good, to look ethical, to promote their reputations, well, then it's not right. They should only be doing it because it's the right thing to do. So they should maybe do the litter picking with just a plain t-shirt on, because it's right to litter pick. Why are they there in their Barclays t-shirts? I don't know if you've seen companies do that sometimes. Like, why do they have to, if Tesco is doing something for a local community project, why do they have to have posters of it in Tesco's? They should just do it because it's the right thing to do. So for Kant, this idea of the reputation and trying to promote yourself might not be so ethical. So, for example, caring for pollution or noise, or the safety of your workers only for the reputation rather than for the safety of your workers is wrong as well. So a business should only do the good thing because it's the right thing to do, not for any other reason. However, the utilitarian view would say, well, let's weigh it up. What's the good impact going to come from this action over the negative thing that might happen? So Barclays Bank, I don't know why I keep using this as an example, litter picking on a Saturday afternoon, workers in a blue t-shirt. Maybe they're not happy litter picking, maybe they could be doing something else. But generally, the goodness that's going to come from that, of people having a nice local area to walk in, people feeling good, that they can kind of sit in their park, maybe that outweighs the negative side. People's interests have to be brought into it. And we have to see, so could it be that utilitarian, though, could basically support acting irresponsibly if it's going to provide a greater amount of pleasure than pain. So if there's going to be a huge amount of profit made from something unethical, some pollution dumping, or some treating a few workers badly, a few people having a bad time, and then all the customers get a nice cheap product, the shareholders get a lovely big fat bonus. Does that mean that then you're neglecting the rights of the minority there over the pleasure or the goodness that comes from the majority? We'll have a look at some cases that will help us think of that too. So Milton Friedman, and this is one of the questions the exam can come up with, this is one of the ones on the spec, is basically CSR, corporate social responsibility, so caring for or behaving in a way that's ethical for all the different stakeholders in your company. Is it just really covering up the idea that the business is greedy and wants to make profits? Are they doing all of these things because they want to make money? Is it just sort of hypothetical, so it's not really, or hypocritical? Is it not really caring at all? Is it just sort of pretending? So that's Milton Friedman saying this, that basically actually the responsibility for businesses increases profits, nothing else. That's the point of doing CSR for Milton Friedman, only if it's helping you to get the money. One example here I wanted to use is actually McDonald's. So if I'll italic it here. So McDonald's, we sort of think it's got so much attention on it from everybody because it's such a big company that it's actually done quite a lot to try and get its reputation up. So if you go in there now, like I actually went there the other week in Stratford, the Happy Meals that used to be in plastic boxes are now all in like cardboard that's recyclable. All the little plastic toys you used to get that were wrapped in plastic are now all in cardboard as well. The food, all the eggs are like free range eggs, and then you've got like organic salads grown there and things, and you've got all the beef. For years the rainforests were being cut down for beef to be there, cows to be grazing there, and so people got really annoyed about that, so they've made a really big effort that every bit of beef they have comes with a Rainforest Alliance certified, that no rainforest has been cut down to do this. And yet people still seem to have a thing for McDonald's. They don't like it, and it seems to be having to work on its reputation all the time. Whereas Burger King has actually found to be doing worse things. So, for example, it was when it was quiet, they were saying their workers could have these breaks and they weren't paying them. So people were there working, but they weren't getting paid. Things like this that Burger King were doing. Whereas McDonald's, we have this view as like being like, and not, does anyone work for McDonald's who's here at the moment? No? You all gone? You still here? Show a hand if you're still here. Oh, great. Okay, good. So sometimes people work for McDonald's who are in this class, and I talk about this. I mean, I don't know what your view is of McDonald's generally. Do you have the view that it's, you could type in the chat or tell me what you think? People have this idea that because it's this huge company around the world and it's called advertising, it must be like a big baddie. I think people sometimes do. So it works really hard on its reputation. Whereas actually other companies might not have the spotlight on them as much, and they get away with doing more, basically. So, and I think it's a good thing that CSR has been growing as an idea that companies have to think of this. And I think it's really connected to the internet and social media. A company that did this quite early on, actually, was The Body Shop. Show of hands if you've ever been to The Body Shop. Yeah, a few of you have been to The Body Shop, or a company like Lush as well is a bit like this. So The Body Shop, way back, gosh, when I was your age, so it's like, only 20 years ago, there was huge issues with animal testing that was happening. And nowadays, I think a lot less animal testing happens, where cosmetics are like put in rabbits' eyes, and then, just awful things done to animals before humans could use the different products. Whereas The Body Shop was one of the first companies to come out and say, we're not going to have any animal testing. It was a big selling point that they had. And fair trade as well. So fair trade is the idea that the people who work in the supply line, like remember I said, like they might be making the trainers or growing the coffee or making the cocoa beans for chocolate, they get a decent wage, a decent proportion of what the product sells for. So if I sell, when I do this in class, I normally bring some chocolate in and we eat it. If I sold a bar of chocolate to you for £1, then like 50p of it would go to the people who made it. Whereas other companies, like 5p might go to them, and I would keep 95p for my profit. Whereas fair trade is the idea that everyone involved in making a product gets a fair amount of the money. And the Body Shop was one of the first one of the first companies to really push this, as well as animal rights as well, and lots of things like that. And they really pushed this idea of it helping them to succeed as a business as well. And I think they're a really big brand now, aren't they, the Body Shop? They're really big, they're everywhere, and they're doing really well. And part of that, you could say, was because of this CSR that they had. It doesn't always have to conflict with the money that you're making. It doesn't have to conflict. It can actually help. Like Atika said, it helps with the reputation. Fantastic. So to think about that, that's a lot of chat from me. I am going to go to another Mentimeter because I love them. And everyone can join in with this. Just ask me your questions if you have any at any point. Yeah. So let me find them here. Is it still showing this to you? Yeah, great. So here's the different stakeholders we were talking about. You can probably see it on the screen there while I get the Mentimeter up. Yeah, here, okay, great. So can everyone go to this Mentimeter? Oh, no, not that one. Ignore that. Hang on a second. Let me do this one here. I'll do it again. There you go. If I open it up, pop it out. Everyone found it? Okay, good. And then I'm going to show our screen in a second. Okay. Is everyone typing in their ideas? Oh yeah, cool. Yeah, good. So 4 of you, but there are your opinions. Well, it's yeah, Friedman did say that. So it's how much do you agree or disagree with them? Yeah. Thank you for the clarity, Reem. The first one, the one that's on my screen at the moment, yeah? I'm trying to do today, and I'm going to try to do more in class, like opportunities for us to sort of say our opinions and, develop that voice that I've said we need to have in our essays. What you actually think about this, because you could have either of these 3 could be your view. Is the responsibility to increase its profits only? Is it if they do it to look good, then you're not really doing a good thing. You're just trying to look good. But if they do good things and it causes more pleasure than pain, that is good. Great. So we're agreeing more with, well, Reem, which one do you think, what theory do you think the bottom one goes with the most? The one that everyone seems to agree with more? Or anybody can say. Yeah, good. It goes with the utilitarian view. It's like, well, let's look at the impact and see what happens. It might increase the profits. That's good for the shareholders, but it might also increase the experience for the customers. It might also increase the workers, the employment rights for the workers. It might increase the impact for future generations. Let's not forget the environmental impact. And a few of the examples in the booklet are about the environmental impact that businesses have. Great. Okay, I'm going to move on to the next one. Good. Okay, next one. Out of all those stakeholders, though, which one do you think should be the most important? And I just had to use that stupid joke at Hold My Steak. I thought that was ridiculous last night when I saw that. Which ones? I think you can rank them 1 to 8. Yeah. Atika's going to say something like, well, they're all important in their own way, aren't you, Atika? Ever the diplomat. Wow. That's interesting, isn't it? Oh, it's really interesting. I wonder whether we would have had the environment so high when I was your age at college. That's brilliant, isn't it? I wonder why people have put the environment. And do you know what? That's something that I suppose canteen ethics does link to the environment, because it's kind of it's about the people that would live in the environment. So are they being treated as an end in themselves, with their dignity and worth, to be able to live there, to be able to function there? But it really does link with Peter Singer's utilitarianism, this idea that the any sentient animal as well, um, is worth, like, in our calculation as well. A sentient animal, and we'll think about that with euthanasia as well. A sentient animal is one that is aware of pain and feels pain and pleasure and is aware of it. So for him, any animals that are like harmed, or if you think about I don't know, chimpanzees who are having the orangutans having their trees cut down for palm oil, for example, they are suffering. The suffering caused to them by their habitat being destroyed, it also is part of the equation for someone like Peter Singer. Or you've seen those pictures of the polar bear like clinging onto the ice because the ice caps are melting. So the environmental impact is also impacting these animals as well, that are sentient living beings. So for Peter Singer, yeah, he would agree with you guys, I think, saying that for the environment. The customers, suppliers, yeah. So the customers is that that old saying, the customer's always right. Are they the ones? They're the ones who basically are generating, I guess, the money for all the other stakeholders. But then, would you have that without the local? What about the local community, the local area? Fantastic. And you can sometimes see that these might conflict, but sometimes they won't. You can maybe think of examples of when they might conflict, and then you can think of what things might benefit all of them. Fantastic. So I'm going to move on to the next part I wanted to look at. So the relationship. That's it. The relationship between. I need to share that again here. A window. Great. Hopefully that's going to be sharing with you now. So yeah, the consumers or the customers of a business are very important and must be thought about in terms of business ethics, not just the employees, not just the owners and the shareholders, but the consumers, the people who buy the product. And we, in the past, you didn't really have this idea of consumer rights. There was this idea of caveat emptor, meaning let the buyer beware. If you're going to buy something, it's down to you. You chose to buy it. You parted with your money. But now we have a much better standing as consumers. We have got consumers' rights where we can expect a certain standard for what we buy. But if we ignore the instructions of when we buy something, then we are responsible. But basically, we have rights as consumers that if we buy something that's falsely advertised or that breaks or that damages us or harms us, we have rights now when we didn't have them before. So the human rights of a consumer, it can't harm our life. And sometimes this connects to things to do with medicine and the NHS. But also it can connect to do with like risk assessments, to do with faulty products, which we'll look at a case study in a second. So why might canteen ethics match to consumer rights? Well, how could we link canteen ethics? I know we're going to talk about utilitarianism in a second. How could canteen ethics connect to consumers' rights? If I'm a business, I must treat, and if I'm a business and I have consumers and customers, I can't just use them as consumers and think, oh, I'm just going to get money out of them. How much money can I get? How much money can I get for this phone from someone and not care about the person, and just try and get the money from them. I'm using them then, aren't I? I'm using them as a means to an end, as a means to my profit. But what I can do is respect that person and their dignity, and be honest with them and not lie to them, and be truthful about my product, and respect them and their intrinsic human worth, apart from just the means to an end, just getting money from them to get the phone. So I think the link with consumers can be something you could talk about canteen ethics quite well. But then a criticism, and then you could also use utilitarianism and say that I'm just checking everyone's in the chat here. Utilitarianism, and say, well, hang on, if we're just going to do like a pure calculation, then maybe the amount of money that's going to be gained by the shareholders and into the business and employees, maybe that's much greater than the pleasure that's going to go to the few consumers by me treating them properly and like making sure I don't, harm them, perhaps. So you're going to kind of weigh that up. Is it a bit too sort of, because we're just looking at the impact, aren't we? We're looking at the effect or the amount of pleasure that's going to go to the owners and the shareholders by this whopping great bonus, by this huge amount of profit and the things they're going to get from that. Perhaps that is then going to outweigh, the few people that might buy this product that have this or that bad negative impact. So would the utilitarian view sort of neglect the minority of these consumers over the whopping great profit that the owners are going to make? So that could be a criticism we could give to using utilitarianism. But which utilitarian, quick quiz, would say, well, hang on, making money and profit is a bit of a lower pleasure anyway, so I'm not really talking about that kind of pleasure. Who would say that? Do you want to type it in, or unmute and tell me? But you can type it in, I don't mind. Who would say, actually, so Bentham would say pleasures, they're all kind of equal, aren't they? But which person says that you've got higher and lower pleasures? So this idea that these people making big fat bonuses and having loads of money, I said it at the beginning if people heard me. Yeah, Mill, fantastic. So Mill says, well, you've got higher and lower pleasures. So obviously that is, you're going for like a lower pleasure there if you're just making money and generating profit for these people, not really thinking about it properly. But you could say, crudely, that utilitarianism could seem to sometimes outweigh, or say you've got lots of employees, like later we can think about this with the environment, lots of employees who've got a job, who are functioning with their work, they've got a paycheck coming in each month, and then you've got the supply chain and they're coming in, and then you've just got a few people who live in the local area who just happen to have their water being polluted by the factory. But that's just like 100 people who live in this village who get their water polluted. Whereas you've got perhaps 1,000 people working for this company and in this supply chain of whatever this company is. But you've got a few people in the village who are like having a negative impact. Well, utilitarianism then would argue that the benefit for this big group is more than the damage that's happening to this small group. So therefore, it's okay. It could be used in that way, basically. So a case study we'll use before we just take a quick break is that Ford Pinto in the 70s, and you can have time to go through this and work and have a look at it yourself as well, basically was selling a car, and it was to do with like having more space in the luggage compartment to fit bigger things in there. So they were selling a car, and that actually, when they made this bigger luggage place, it kind of connected the luggage closer to the gas tank, so it was causing more cars to explode, a lot more damage to happen, and like accidents to happen. And so there was an explosion in 8 out of 11 of the tests that they did. But they did these tests after basically the car was sent out. So they needed to recall all of these cars, but they didn't want to recall them. Recall them meaning like to say to people, don't drive these cars, they're dangerous, we need to bring them back again. They didn't want to do that because that's going to cost so much money. They calculated that, well, what they just needed to do was wait, and then if people had accidents, they would pay damages, and that was actually cheaper than recalling all the cars in. So you could argue the right thing to do would be to say, everyone, your life is at risk, bring the cars in, like don't drive these cars anymore, your life is at risk. But they sort of calculated, well, weighing it up, a few people are going to get hurt, but we'll pay that off. That's still cheaper for us than than recalling all the cars. So they basically put people's lives at risk because of this. So in the end, they did issue a recall after there was 500 casualties. 500 people died in cars after 2 million cars were sold. And they were taken to court, but they weren't found to be guilty, even though it was the first time an American corporation was ever prosecuted for criminal homicide charges. They basically knowingly allow people to drive cars that weren't safe. So, how would utilitarianism and Kant think about this Ford Pinto health and safety issue? A utilitarian might say, well, look, they did do the right thing because they were weighing up the cost, they're weighing up the damages done by recalling the cars to the company with all the money, and actually it was cheaper to just pay out when people had accidents. But then actually, don't forget that Bentham's hedonic calculus is thinking about lots of different things to do with pleasure. What about the long-term impacts of somebody dying? The impact it's going to have on their family, the impact it's going to have, or an injury that's like life-threatening or life-changing. That's going to have a longer-term impact. So I think even a utilitarian wouldn't argue that Ford did the right thing. And Kant, too, would argue that Ford was being very cynical and treating his customers as a mean to an end. It didn't really care enough about their lives to calculate and work out it would be cheaper to allow people to die and then pay damages than it would to recall the cars in the first place. And for me, that example just shows the importance of business ethics and thinking ethically in a business. So you might say, I don't know what Milton Friedman would say about that. Ford had a duty to make money for its shareholders. That's the duty that it had, Milton Friedman. Do you remember? It's all about making the profit for your shareholders. But here we have utilitarianism and Kant to remind us that a business should be ethical. What I'm going to say is, if you don't mind, that I want to take a quick break before doing a second session. Can I have a hands up if that's okay with you, if we just take a quick 10-minute break and come back at 10:05? Yeah, okay, I'll keep the chat open and everything. I'll stay here, but back at 10:05. It's a lot of information to take in. Great. Okay, I'll see you back here in I'll put it on here on the thingy. Back at 10:05. Then I'll see you all in 10 minutes. Hi everyone, I'm back. I'll just let everyone come back together. Oh, sorry, Sahana, we took a break and then we're back together again. So yeah, but we can go to this Menti now. So for this, you need to know what whistleblowing is. So I'll just let everyone come back together again. Maybe raise a hand when you're back, so I know you're here. Oh, lovely, 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 lovely. Hello, hello. A window. Let's go for this. So hopefully, so you need to know what whistleblowing is. If I put it in the Menti chat again. So whistleblowing is anytime someone who works for a company or in a business believes what that business is doing is unethical or wrong, and they basically go to the media or the press or the outside world basically and say what's happened and what's happening there. So it could be a company, or it happens quite a lot to do with the government. Perhaps they've gone to their boss and they haven't said anything, or they said, "Oh, come on, we're not telling everyone about that." It's sometimes where someone thinks something is wrong that's happening, and then they make public what's going on. Basically, it comes from the old time when people used to have a whistle to blow for the police. So they believe. So you might go to the police, you might go to the press about something. Often it's to the press, so that to the newspapers and everything, about something they believe is wrong. And we're going to think now about whether that's an ethical thing to do or not. So first of all, like, if you can think of any examples of whistleblowing, I type them into the Mentimeter. If you think of any times where people have said, okay, what they're doing is wrong there. There's quite a famous one that's in the news at the moment that we were going to talk about, but there might be other ones. You've got Edward Snowden, who did that for the intelligence agency in America. He basically came out and said that they were spying on everybody. You've got a woman called Catherine Gunn who did the same thing in the UK when she said that spies are being used to spy on other countries to try and force them to vote for the Iraq War. They were trying to force people in the United Nations to vote for the Iraq War by blackmailing them. You have got any other examples of people who might have whistleblown? Can you think of any examples? Let's see if anyone's got any examples. Yeah, social media news, fantastic, good. Yeah, fraud, social media news articles, people saying that something's happening that they think isn't right, basically. And they kind of got that inside view in the company, so they know something's not right. Perhaps they tried to change it, they tried to do something, but they've got to the point where they have to go public and say about it happening. Now, that's going to have huge impacts and ramifications on them. Sometimes they're seen as breaking the law and they go to court, or they even go to jail. Look at Edward Snowden, who is living in exile, basically, isn't he? He can't return to the United States because he was seen to have put people's lives at risk by saying the United States were spying on everybody in their phones and on the computers and everything, that he'd put their national security at risk. So he's like put his life, he can't return to the United States. It's a really good film to watch about him. Snowden, really good film to think about this. Or there's another film called Official Secrets, which is Catherine Gunn. Another example, yes, Frances Hogan, well done. Yeah, we're going to have a look at her in a second. Could be unethical to suppliers, could be the treatment of people in sweatshops, it could be the treatment, something that's going to consumers that isn't fit. Maybe someone in Ford Pinto back then in the 70s could have been a whistleblower and said, look, hey, this is what's happening. Other examples could be Julian Assange. He's kind of helping people whistleblow from the army. So sometimes it's from like government or public bodies. Sometimes it happens in hospitals as well. If people feel that, look, this isn't safe, something's not happening right. Sometimes in schools as well, where people have they feel this that something's not happening that's ethical, and they need to let the world know, basically. So thinking about Frances Hogan, who has recently let's put these Facebook gifts there. So what has she recently said? That Facebook, she was working quite high up in Facebook in America, and she has said that Facebook deliberately amplifies its algorithms. You know the word algorithm gives content to people that it thinks is going to give them an emotional reaction, make them quite angry and quite stressed and react to it. Because the more they react, the more they might dislike it, and then it's got like, or they might sort of share and say, isn't this awful? And then the more it gets shared and the more angry people get, the more sharing, the more advertising basically can be sold from that piece of content, because more people are going to see it. So therefore more money is generated for Facebook and the Facebook shareholders. So Milton Friedman might say, yeah, that's generating money. People, it's not forcing people to share it. It's not like holding a gun to someone's head to say you must share this. People are choosing to share it, but it's been deliberately manipulated, she was arguing, in a way that's detrimental to the mental health of people. It's causing people to distrust each other more. It's causing that polarization between people. People are more divided in society. She also talked about how it's creating negative body images for young girls, for example, images, that kind of thing. So what do you think Kant or utilitarian would say about this? I think I've done it that you can just type an answer and they should come up, hopefully. What do you think they would make of it? There we go again, something like that. What do you think Kant would make of whistleblowing or utilitarianism? Or we can come back to it once we've talked about it. Maybe we should come back to it once we've talked about it. Yeah, leave that one for a second. And we'll talk about it a bit and then we'll come back to it. So I'm going to now share here instead. This one, getting the hang of this. So here, great, good. Okay, I'm going to hide that chat so I can see you here a bit more. So whistleblowing is basically when someone in a business makes public their belief that the business is acting unethically. They might go to the police or the press. They might be anonymous, or they might do it publicly by their name. Obviously, if they're anonymous, people might not believe it or not trust it. But if you say your name, then you're, well, number one, you're pretty much certain to lose your job, aren't you? And then you're also going to perhaps face legal issues or bullying or intimidation. Sometimes people feel like they're being unethical if they're whistleblowing. They'll say, well, hang on, that's not a very ethical thing to do. You're only showing one side of the story. You could have done it in a different way. Why didn't you go to the boss? Why didn't you speak to them instead of going public with it? Why did you have to make a big thing of it? Also, you know, the company might go into disrepute. Remember Atika's point earlier about the reputation of the company, so important. You know, you're damaging the reputation of the company. That's going to perhaps put jobs at risk if people don't use that company anymore. Jobs are going to be at risk, livelihoods are going to be at risk, all the way down the supply chain, all the different parts that are connected to it. So is it really an ethical thing to do? But if that whistleblower is putting their life or their job at risk by doing that because they believe it's so wrong what's happening, maybe it is the ethical thing to do. So Kant would say it's kind of tricky because on the one hand, remember Kant argues you should always tell the truth. You shouldn't ever lie. You can't use people by lying to them, using them to whatever your as a means to whatever end you want, or you're not treating people with the dignity or allowing them to make a reasoned, dignified choice if you're lying to them. So whistleblowing is you're telling the truth, you're saying how it is. You've got a duty to be fair and honest with your customers as well. You've got to be honest to your customers. However, you also have this duty of promise keeping and loyalty to your company. You sign a contract when you take a job. You sign a contract that you will perhaps uphold and protect the company. Perhaps if you're working for the government, you sign the Official Secrets Act to say you will not disclose anything that happens in these four walls. What happens here stays here, for the safety of lives in the country. If we've got people working in the army or the military or the government giving away our secrets, then doesn't that put more lives at risk? So it can be difficult, and this is a really big criticism of Kantian ethics, if your duties kind of conflict. So on the one hand, I need to tell the truth and be honest, but on the other hand, I need to be loyal to my company. So I have this kind of conflict of duties. And that is quite a good criticism of Kant overall. It's like, well, how do we know which duty we have to follow when they seem to conflict sometimes? I think ultimately, I don't know. I think ultimately Kantian ethics would say that you should whistleblow because it's about that honesty and that's the right thing to do. And even if you're going to have bad consequences for yourself, bad consequences, it's still the right thing to do. But yeah, you can still have that conflict, can't you? Utilitarianism would be, again, looking at the impact, the effect of is it going to maximize pleasure or not? Is it going to, in the long term, be a good idea? maybe the company needs this wake-up call, or it needs to have safety measures. And in the long term, Ford Pinto with those cars couldn't keep doing that forever, blowing up the cars forever and ever. That's no good for the company anyway, because then no one's going to buy the cars anymore. So you have to think about the impact. So if someone does whistleblow and it makes a better situation for greater number of pleasure in the long term for the greater number of people, then perhaps it is the right thing to do. But if it brings about the end of the company and it kind of folds and goes under, then maybe there'll be too many financial losses for shareholders. And people are going to lose their jobs all down the supply chain, the people who drive the stuff from the factory to the shop. That's going to have a knock-on effect that if that company goes under, is it going to have a bigger it cause more pain than pleasure? Remember, that's what you're always weighing up for utilitarianism. But other companies might benefit by learning from them, so overall it might weigh out. Anti-utilitarians, so that's like Bentham, would say, well, let's look at every single situation and just decide. We can't say now whether it is or isn't a good thing. We just have to look at every single one and work out each time, was that the right thing to do or not? Or is it the right thing to do? Whereas a rule utilitarian, who's basically Mill, would say, well, let's work out as a rule, is it a good idea to whistleblow? And then we can whistleblow. But you don't need to know the difference so much between act and rule for the specification. If you didn't do that last year, don't freak out about that. But basically, utilitarians are going to try and anticipate what the long-term effects would be. And that can actually be quite difficult. For me, you could always use that as a criticism of utilitarianism, is we can't tell the future. You never know what impact an action is going to have. So now I've sort of said about that to you, why don't we go back to the Mentimeter and now see if you could type in what you think Kant or utilitarians would say about what happened with Facebook. Because did you see in the news today, Facebook has still got like huge profits. I saw today they've still said it's like $9 billion or something they've made, even though these this whistleblowing happened. Okay, let's go to here, open it up. So you should be able to go back into the chat and use that Menti again. It's still in the chat, so hopefully you can see it, everyone. And then I'm going to share it here. Oh, great. So I've got some of you writing some ideas here. Good. What do you think? Let's see. Kant would argue we should look at our moral duty. And there's yeah, good. What do you think, everyone? Everyone can write something in, hopefully. There's one there. There's like 10 of us on the call. So yeah, let's get a few more up there. Maybe if you're done with that, think about which one you think is better. Has everyone else managed to find it, or you're just typing like epic essays for me? So Kant would say that what she did was right because she was telling the truth about what Facebook is doing. But was it right to sort of go against her company when she'd obviously signed a contract to work for them? Should she have perhaps tried more channels? Is the duty of truth or the duty of loyalty more important? Good question. So how can you link it specifically to this one about Facebook, basically? I guess that's what I was wondering. But you can just talk about whistleblowing generally, but how could you apply it to that specific case? Could you say that Facebook are using, and I'm on Facebook all the time, so I'm one of these people, are using me as a means to an end. They're using me and my interests and my emotions as a way to make a profit by the adverts that come up. So the more they can emotionally manipulate me by what they give me, the more I'm going to like or share or dislike or give some kind of like interaction with that post. So the more they can like rile me up, they're using me and my emotional reactions as a way to make money for that from their advertising for their shareholders. So they're using me as a means to an end. So by her doing this whistleblowing and saying, look, this is what's happening, surely a Kantian ethicist, I think, would say, well, that's a good thing, because then they can no longer use me as a means to it, and they have to recognize I'm an end in myself. I'm my own person. I'm not just there to generate their profit. Whereas utilitarians might argue, well, I guess they might argue that doing that kind of manipulation is causing, she was expressing faces of wrongdoing, so she could have potentially said, yeah, good. Yeah. They could have lost their jobs and income at Facebook, etc. Exactly. Would a utilitarian argue that Facebook is generating pain by causing me to have emotional reactions, strong emotional reactions? She was basically saying disharmony in society, polarization, problems between people increasing, distrust, racism, xenophobia, homophobia, sexism, all of this increasing because of the content that we're looking at. Okay, whistleblowing helps the majority of owners be forced to make the change for the public. Yeah, good, fantastic. So that's more of a utilitarian. No, that was good. I like that utilitarian view, wasn't it? Because it's saying that talking about the majority, the rights of the majority. Fantastic. Increasing the pleasure. What other ideas do we have? That's 4 of you. Oh, there's 10 of you on here, so let's have a couple more. Good. And then what's the other ones I wanted to do today? Let's have a see what we've got here. We've got a couple more. We have a duty to our thingies, da 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 da. Okay, great. So actually, I was going to read a bit more, but I think I'll get you to write in here as well. This idea that good ethics is good business, and this gets shortened to GEIGB. Good ethics is good business. Sometimes it gets shortened to that. You can do that on your notes. So good ethics is good business. So this idea, a bit like Tika said earlier about your reputation as a company, if you do good ethics, then is it that then you're just going to have good business as a kind of knock-on effect, that the more ethical you are, the better you're treating everybody, the better you're treating your environment, the better you are treating all the different stakeholders in your company, the better your business is going to be. But this also sort of touches on what do we mean by the word good, which we will look at with meta ethics in the new term after Christmas. We'll look at this idea of, well, what do we mean by saying it's good or not? Do we mean that it's good for the employees? Do we mean that it's good for the shareholders? Or do we mean good in some other sense of like what being good is? So we will come back to this idea again. I'll refer back to it when we do this in year, I think that's fine. I'm going to stop sharing that one now. Of idea of like, well, what does it mean to say that it's a good business? But lots of companies will say, yeah, by making good ethical choices, it makes us a good business and it helps everybody and we get our profits up and it's a really good thing for us. So let me just see if that is here. Yeah, good. Okay. So a few more Mentimeters we're going to have to think about this. Because I've got the free version, I can't have it all in one. I have to do lots of separate ones. I'm sorry, everyone. Here. Good ethics is good business. Okay. So what, let me just check this one here. Present. So what does make a good business? What makes good business in your mind? What do you think it means? Oh, that's a good business, or it is good business sense? Do you think it is really about the consumers, or do you think it is about the share prices going up for your shareholders, or is it about having a good impact, providing good livelihood, sustainability, a good pay wage for people? What do you think? Have you managed to join it? Have I lost some of you? You still here? Give me a raised hand if you're still here with me, everyone. Oh, yeah, okay, good. You're still here. Great. What do you think? You managed to join it? Let me have a look, see what people are writing here. Sustainability, good. Satisfaction, employees. And do you know what? Sustainability, I think, goes along with that means that it's there for the future, isn't it? So it's not just about like making a quick buck now. It's something that's sustainable for the future, which can continue to support people's lives. And eco-friendly, fantastic. And it does make sense. I mean, it's something that lots of businesses say now, it does make business sense to be eco-friendly as well. Thinking about the impact, giving back to the communities, being satisfaction, sustainability employers. Good, great. Fulfilled customers. Yeah, the consumers getting what they have, because it's people's hard-earned money they're putting into these things, isn't it? Impact, being sustainable, considering the effects. Fantastic, good. So we have got a sort of very, we're a very ethical bunch, aren't we? Because I've always wanted to do this course like with our class and then take it with like a business. Does anyone do business studies here? I just wondered how different it might be. Does anyone do business studies or anything like that? Show of hands, no? Does anyone in our class, do you know? Because sometimes I've done this course and like there's someone who does business studies as well as this, and then I say to them, how different do you think some of the answers would be? Oh, you did it at GCSE. Yeah, I've always wondered, like, I'd love to go in and like do the same lessons and see. I mean, ideally, I'd love to do a big debate between the two classes and see if we could like argue. Same at GCSE, yeah, like have a big debate about whether a business's main priority should be. In fact, maybe we should try and do anyway. It's a dream I've got. One day having a big debate about that to see whether we are a bit more like that because we're studying ethics, or maybe people are. Oh, it's only a BTEC at Morpeth. Yeah, but before I've had like, oh, maybe they've done like economics, maybe? Anyone do economics here? Yeah. Oh, you do economics, Jamila. Do you think your economics class would have similar answers to us today or different ones? What do you think? No different. Oh, you think it'd be the same? They'd say the same things. Yeah. I think maybe with or no different. You could unmute and say it rather than type it if you like, or you can type an answer. Does Jamila mean no different or no different? It would be different answers. Ah, yeah, I think it would. Maybe we should have a debate with the economics class, and you could be the judge in the middle, Jamila. People would think, yeah. So you have, I mean, in companies, you would have different types of people as well, wouldn't you? And you might, often you'll have in companies, you might have the manager and the sort of the bosses, and then you might have consultants on CSR. Remember, that's corporate social responsibility, or your PR people might talk about this, or you might have a sustainability person in the company. So you have these different voices saying that these things still matter. So yeah, great. Okay, lovely. What about our second point here, which is yeah, which one do you agree with the most here? So I've got increasing the profit of a business is the right thing. And that would be Friedman who says that. Or treating people as an end in themselves is the right thing. Or increasing the pleasure of the greatest number of people is the right thing to do. What do you think is the right thing to do out of those three? Or maybe none of them, I don't know. See, I said at the beginning that I think utilitarianism, we find a bit, I don't want to say easier, but it's sort of feels a bit more straightforward, or some of the language seems a bit more easier to get your head around the theory. But I personally feel that something like Kantian ethics has got a lot to say for business ethics, because in business, there is that risk of kind of seeing people as a calculation. Think about Ford Pinto, you know, seeing their lives as a kind of calculation on the page, or well, how much money is this and how much money is that. So I personally would probably argue that Kantian ethics has got perhaps Kantian ethics have got the most use for thinking about the issues of business ethics, whereas utilitarianism might be the simpler one to actually work out, but I don't know whether that makes it right, if that makes sense. Because remember, in exam, you might get asked, like, which one of the two is most useful or practical. Remember, the wording can be different, or which one is the most applicable to this issue. Or you might get a specific issue like whistleblowing, and then you have to say which one would be the most useful, or globalization, which we might talk about in a minute before we go. So yeah, we'll have more time to go over this as well. This is just to get us thinking, really. So maybe we feel more Kantian today in this. What do you think? I think there's basically a lot of criticisms that can be given to utilitarianism, which is great because you can do that all in the essay, can't you? You know, there's lots of things you can criticize it with, especially with this as well, business ethics. Okay, cool. Great. And then one more thing I want to talk to you about today. Okay, we're done. You can look at these. That's fine. Okay, good. So globalization then. I'm going to go get rid of this now. Actually, I'm going to find a quick, I'm going to share this. You can have a read of this while I find a quick video. See if I can find, there's a quick video I want to try and show you in a second. It depends if it sounds going to work. Give me a second. Oh, it might be too tricky for me to find it. I might have to find it for in class with us. So basically, yeah, I'll find it in class. It's going to be too tricky to find it now, or maybe for tomorrow morning. I'm going to present a window here. Okay, great. So maybe Jamila will be able to tell us this then. What is globalization? Can anyone tell me what globalization is? I've got it on the board here, but who could tell me? You could type it in the chat and tell me what globalization is. Or you could tell me if you want to unmute and say. Can anyone tell me what globalization is? I wish you had like 3 little dots so I could see when people are typing, you know, like on a text message, and then you can see when people are typing. Fantastic. Oh, yeah, wonderful. Yeah, lovely. So the interconnectedness between countries of the world becoming more interconnected. So what's that impact on businesses? Then what does it mean to do with businesses being globalized? Because I mean, I feel like a globalized person. I've traveled around. I've got family members from around the world, and I feel very connected. In terms of business ethics, what does it mean for that? Like, what's this interconnectedness thing to do with business ethics? So companies become transnational corporations. So they have basically, you might say they've got bases in different parts of the world. Fantastic. So they're functioning across the world. But what about in terms of a product, for example? In the past, a product would be made in like one place, wouldn't it? Like, mainly, I mean, there'd be bits coming from one of it, but it'd be made in one place. Whereas not, I'm trying to find a trainer. Look, I haven't got a trainer. What I'll do is, you know, I'll find you the video for tomorrow, I think. Things are sold globally and less, LIC, what's that? Less independent countries or less developed countries? Oh, if you do geography and sociology as well, this will help. Yes, good. Yeah. Oh, well done, everyone. So products are sold in different places where they're produced, but even where they're produced can be different for the different parts. So the video I was going to show you basically is a trainer. And this woman's going through, Naomi Klein is an amazing writer on globalization, things like all the different places where all the different parts of the boot the trainer comes from. So like we could look at this boot, maybe this base comes from one place, maybe the metal for the eyes is like mined somewhere else and then made into the eyes here, and then maybe the material here, and then it's stitched at a different place. So all over the world, things are transported and moved around according to where the products are cheaper. Oh, low-income countries. Thanks, Noreen. Or according to where the labor is cheaper, or, you know, my phone, I keep using this as an example because it's next to me, you know, inside the chips, You've got certain metals that are mined in Africa, and you've got children mining that and like really poor conditions there. And then that's sent to somewhere else, like maybe China, where the motherboard is put together, where the technology is put together there. And then lots of us have got different views about how things, you know, are buying stuff from China at the moment. And then maybe the plastic here is molded somewhere else, then it's all put together. So it's kind of very, very connected now. So I don't necessarily know where all the parts have come from that go together to making my phone or my boot here. So that kind of brings in some ethical questions. Number one, it kind of really broadens that stakeholder group past just like the person in the shoe shop or the phone shop, or the person who drives it there, or it makes it so much bigger, much, much more interconnected. So perhaps we need to think of businesses functioning as if the whole world is your stakeholder, not just these individual areas and places. So sometimes companies can have a really good impact on these areas they're working in. Remember, the Body Shop has that commitment to fair trade and fair treatment of the workers, and you can look for that fair trade logo on lots of things now that you go into the shop and buy. I don't know if you've seen it. It's like a sort of circle now with you know, it's like a yellowy greeny circle, fair trade. Okay, I know that that's been traded fairly, and those people all the way along that supply chain around wherever it is in the world have got a fair treatment. But not all companies are doing that kind of thing, and we have got lots of companies that are not necessarily caring so much for the health and safety of their workers. So as Nuran said, you know, making products in companies with lower income, so not only can they pay their employees a lower income, but there may be less health and safety regulations. There might be more ways they can cut corners in terms of how many people can work in a building safely, how many people, so if there's a fire, can they get out? If there is, how many checks are done on the building to check that it's safe? I'm thinking of a particular place where like a huge disaster happened, and we could say, does anyone know where there was a huge disaster in a clothing factory a few years ago? Trying to type it in. Did anyone hear of something that happened in Bangladesh? Yeah, so it was called, do you know what it was called? So again, if we were in class doing this, we'd watch a few documentaries about this and things, but we will have time to do that. It was, yeah, Primark was one of the companies, but not the only one, yeah. Can't remember anymore. It was called Rana Plaza. Rana Plaza. Is it down here? Case study Nike. Oh no, it's not on here. Rana Plaza. Let me see where it is. I think this lady made this before the accident happened. So it's called Rana Plaza. I'll type it in here. And we might talk about it a bit more tomorrow when we do Rana Plaza happened in Bangladesh. So it was a clothing factory that the companies were pressuring the people working in there. In fact, I think we'll do a homework on it, because it's quite interesting to think, well, who was actually to blame? Who was to blame for that to happen? Who would you blame? So let's just set it up a bit. So there's many people, far too many people working in one space, really long hours. Most of them were young girls, weren't they? Around 16, 17, I think most of the ones, people who died there, or even younger, working in there, cramped into this space. They had complained, people had complained about the setup. The owners of the factory had complained and said, we can't produce as much clothing as you want to people like Primark and the companies who were buying from them. So so the accident happens, and who's to blame for it? Is it the business behind them? So is it the person who runs that factory? Is it the businesses buying the clothes from the factories? Oh, sorry, my door bus is going. I don't know why my door bus is going. Or is it the consumers buying the clothes? I mean, I was like, I'm never going to Primark again. And then I still go to Primark, you know. Is it us going to those shops and not thinking about where those things are made? It's wondering, yeah. So the idea of globalization is, we'll talk a bit more about that tomorrow, I think, actually. So there can be these issues around, well, where does this blame lie, or where do the ethics lie when it comes to globalization? Although it doesn't have to be, like Rana Plaza, it has, it did, however, the businesses have the most power. So who actually has the power? But don't the businesses have the power because we as consumers give it to them by buying their products? Do you think we're putting a lot of the emphasis on the businesses and not enough on the consumers with this, do you think? Do you think if we didn't buy it, then they wouldn't do it, would they? Or do you think consumers are always just going to buy what's cheapest and easiest and most convenient? Hmm. Something you could put in an essay, isn't it? You could say all of this is like resting on the businesses, whereas actually perhaps more needs to be done about the consumers. I'm talking about myself here with my iPhone and my clothes, you know. Hmm. Good, Nimka. Um, so so for example, you might say, okay, the Rana Plaza disaster was horrific, but it brought to light and it caused everyone to think and change a little bit how they're doing things. But have they really? I don't know. Maybe we're just not paying enough attention to it now that COVID is happening. So basically, this is like sweatshop labor. So Nike's another example you could use where, Nike was seen to be using child labor, so children were making, the footballs that children were playing with in the rest of the world. So Nike, for example, as a case study, has got 700 shops around. I mean, this was made a couple of years ago, this booklet, so I'm not sure if they still do. They did have 700 shops around the world in 45 countries outside of the United States, in Asia, Indonesia, China, Taiwan, Thailand, Vietnam, Pakistan, and Philippines, and Malaysia. They had no minimum wages, no proper working conditions. Sexual harassment was noticed in the factories. Health and safety wasn't a big emphasis. So people go, they call it a race to the bottom, where people will go to where the market is, the labor is cheapest. But it's cheapest because people have got low income and low health and safety and living standards, basically. So Nike has suffered a lot from people questioning what they're doing using these sweatshops in because of globalization. They can do that in other parts of the world to then come and sell their products over in the rest of the world. So now it's saying that they are trying to curb or try and reduce this and reduce their they do continue to contract their production in some of these countries, although they're trying. So it's something maybe we could research and see if Nike is still doing that. So just thinking about what would utilitarianism and Kant say about this, I think ethically they would both argue that people should be treated well, but let's try and work out what each angle is. So Bentham and Mill were both trying to change society, particularly Bentham, if you remember. He was doing loads of things way before the rest of us were, to do with animal rights, to do with accepting homosexuality, to do with prison reform, all these things to make people's lives better. And so they both would have been appalled with how the people were being treated. Mill would have thought that the fact that the children can be educated, that they got children working in these sweatshops would have been awful. Remember, for him, education and those higher pleasures was really important, and they weren't having that chance for that. But it can sort of divide utilitarians, because what if there's some benefits of globalization? There are benefits given to many people working in these factories that might not have had a job full stop. Perhaps it was better than if they didn't. Perhaps if they look at China and India, which is like, they're both countries that are doing really well from having cheap labor, and then it's kind of, they're becoming like powerhouses, and maybe they'll grow and grow and grow and have much more benefits in the future. But then you've got other utilitarians like Singer, for example, who would say, look, the destruction of the environment is a disadvantage to humans as well as to those sentient animals, the animals that live in those areas. It's okay, no human may be directly harmed by the rainforests being cut down for palm trees to be grown for palm oil, but those orangutans who've got no habitat, they're suffering. Whereas Kant, again, would say, look, we need a kingdom where people are treated as ends in themselves. They're not treated as a means to an end. So if I want to have safe work conditions, a decent wage, then why am I treating those other people differently? Why do I feel just because they're in a different country, they're in a different part of the world, that I can abuse them, basically? That is not following the categorical imperative of wanting everyone to be treated like that everywhere all the time. I'm using them as a means to an end. I'm conscious of the time and thinking one last Mentimeter before we go, and we'll have a little chat, and then I'll talk about what I want to do with you tomorrow. I hope everyone's still got everybody, kind of. Great. So last Mentimeter. And we'll go over this in class as well together. And like I say, I've put lots of other things in the Google Classroom for you. If you also see the Seneca class that most of you have joined but not kind of got through a lot of the work, something else I want you to have a plow through during, oh yeah, globalization, here we go, last one. Last Mentimeter, here we go. Okay, and then hopefully I can share it. Stop sharing into there. And I'll put the recording from today on in our Google Classroom as well. Okay, hopefully that's presenting. Oh, we kind of talked about that one, haven't we? Oh, I got a spelling mistake there. I'm so sorry. Oh no, rookie mistake. Okay, everyone in? Last bit for today? Oh, you can't see the question. Oh, that? Don't worry too much. If you can, that's great. If you can't, don't worry. I'm going to give us one last thing actually to do. The last one pops up. Oh, is it? Just answer whichever one. This one here comes up. Which ethical theory do you think is most useful? That one. Oh, or do you mean the one, the Menti from before? I could just type it in the chat if you want. Which one do you think's best for the issues of globalization? I think I might go again with Kant because it's about treating people, no matter where they are in the world, no matter who they are, with the same like dignity and respect, and treating them as an end in themselves and not a means to an end. But I appreciate the utilitarian view that there can be, a greater benefit that comes from, look at, if I actually asked people in India, would they rather not have a factory there at all, or in Bangladesh, would they rather not have had that factory at all than have it but at a low wage? Maybe they would say, look, by having that factory, I worked there for a bit and then I managed to do this, and maybe benefits come from globalization and for helping these countries build up. And that's perhaps it's just more practical utilitarianism. Well, here we are, we're in the world now. What can we do that's going to create the greatest benefit for everyone? Maybe Kantian ethics is kind of quite idealistic, this idea that we can treat everyone the same. But maybe I'm an idealist. Okay, so maybe it's not working for everyone. Maybe I didn't put the right link there. I've got quite a few things here. Okay, never mind. So one last thing I want to start now. I'm going to keep it open for tomorrow, and tomorrow I'm just going to do like an hour in the morning rather than 2 hours, if that's okay with everyone. Or just or show of hands if you think you would come back tomorrow for an hour. I don't have to do it tomorrow. Okay, if there's a few of you, that's fine. That's fine. Let's do it. Yeah, great. Okay, good. I thought we could start. And I wonder if did you get an email inviting you to join something called let me just see here, Kialo Edu. Let me just see here if you all joined it or not. Okay. So if I share this, can we just try this and see whether this works? So this link here, does that work if you click on it? What happens when you click on that? And then how do I go back to the actual theory thing? Does it work? Oh, didn't I put it here? Oh, sorry. Here, this one here. Oh, sorry, I didn't give you the link. Enable. Why is it not giving me the link? Oh. Does it let you go to here? Okay, try this link. If you go into that classroom, there should be two. Oh, this was supposed to be really clever, really snazzy. I did it in my other class. How do we do? Where do I get the save? Yeah. And I get invite. Okay, here you go. This one here. Yeah. It's Kialo Edu, and then when you click on it, it should bring you to a debate. And it looks like this. It should be quite clever. Let's see. We can add to it tomorrow. Is that open for you? Ah, yeah. So it should be, right, that you can, so Reem's in there, let's see. It should be that you can add, you could either like say what you think about my two theses, or you can add your own points. Oh, you can write a comment on them. Yeah, so you can write a comment on my thesis and see whether you think is, whether you agree or disagree, or you could give an example. Oh, you need to sign up. Yeah, it should be super simple. Oh, maybe that's going to be too tricky. Oh, yeah, yeah. You should be able to sign up really easily. Just with your Google, I guess. And then if this works as a class, we can use it more for different debates for lots of different topics. It was quite good with my other class last year. It's just a way of being able to like have a debate on there. Can they let you in? You can add another thesis if you like. You can, I think you can vote. You can say whether you think it's false or improbable, plausible, probable, or true. Like how far do you agree with each one? You can add a comment to it, add an example to it. Or we can add to it like tomorrow as well. Tomorrow will just be 1 hour. I thought you can like go to. You can add. I think you click comment and then you can add a comment to it. Or then how do you do a criticism? Maybe just add it as a comment for now. I might flip it and do it slightly differently tomorrow. Let's try. Oh look. Great, so I can see who's in here now. Brilliant. So I think you can vote on how strong you think it is. And then you should be able to say, so how would I say that that is? You can't add anything. Okay, I'll tell you what I might do is tomorrow I'm going to set it up slightly differently. So it's like one statement that we argue for or against like this. I think that works a bit better. So I'll do a different one tomorrow for us. That's fine. But now that you're in, it's fine. You can't add anything. Maybe if you were, did everyone else manage to add anything? Let's park it and do it tomorrow. We've got 3 minutes till 11 o'clock now. We will, oh, now you think you can. Great. Well, I'll tell you what, tomorrow I'm going to have a new one that is a bit more simpler, which I'll have one statement and we'll just argue either side of it. And I want to spend a bit of time tomorrow, like kind of evaluating some of these ideas, maybe do an example paragraph. We'll just do an hour tomorrow from 9 till 10. And let me just see who's here actually. Lovely, fantastic. So what I'll say is, we'll do that tomorrow. I'm thinking of the time now as well, because it's like nearly 10 o'clock. I want to say thank you for being here. I hope that was useful. I'll save the recordings, you can rewatch it, and then there's some tasks you can get on with as well. But that's all right, Nimka, thank you. Everyone will do all the homework anyway as well. It's just you've had a bit more time to think about it now. It's going to be good. We're going to get everything done with lots of time to revise as well for the summer. And we will go back over this in class 2. Thank you. I'll do my CBBS wave and see you all tomorrow.